Lon Seidman, and I figured it was time to take a second look at the Mad Catz Mojo because I have been waiting for probably months now for that firmware update to come down to add the Ouya support to the console, and now it is here. So Ouya, the game store and its whole little ecosystem, now runs on their console, but also now on the Mad Catz, and apparently other stuff is coming soon. Let me do a quick recap of what this console is. This is a fanless Tegra 4 based Android device that really was very generic when it came out. It just kind of booted you up to an Android screen. They were hoping that you would root the device, and they gave you instructions to do that, but I never considered that very user-friendly, and I think it was really marketed as a mass consumer product when it was really not very easy to get set up and operating. That's in stark contrast to the Ouya, which really built a beautiful interface on top of an Android layer that is still kind of not matched yet by this, even though it is running the Ouya App Store, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. But basically, it's a pretty nice little system, though. Again, you got that Tegra 4 processor inside. You have a USB 3 port. I actually plugged in a keyboard and mouse because it's still a little flaky on its navigation, at least outside of the Ouya App Store. There's a dongle here for the game controller that it comes with, which takes up the other USB port on it. And the reason you kind of want to keep that on there is that the controller can kind of pop into two different modes on the fly. So one mode, like it's in right now, is game controller mode. The second one is mouse mode, and you kind of need that sometimes to navigate around this screen because, again, you're running an operating system that is designed mostly for running on tablets and smartphones, and to not be able to use a touchscreen, you kind of have to let the controller or a mouse substitute that kind of functionality. So you have to kind of switch back and forth on the fly, and it's really, it's unfortunate, but that's the ropes. And the one thing that they did on the controller, which was kind of odd, which was go with this whole notion of the switch, where what Ouya did with their controller was actually add a touchpad to the center of the controller here, so you could get that mouse functionality without having to switch modes. And I thought that was a much smarter design. And it's funny, the more I use other things, the more I appreciate what Ouya has done with their console. It really wasn't easy to design the hardware and the software around the way they did, and you'll see again in a minute why things are a little bit better on the Ouya still. You have Ethernet, HDMI. It now supports 4K output. I don't have a way to play 4K on anything in my house, but you can switch it into UHD mode, Ultra HD, and play 4K content off of it. I also found it was playing 1080p Blu-ray movies just fine, including output to a home theater system. So I'll show you briefly XBMC in a little bit as well. Beneath the HDMI port is an SDXC port for a micro SD card that'll support up to 128 gigs of storage, additional storage, and it has 16 on board. So it's a really nice piece of hardware. The controller is really nice too, but the software was just kind of lacking, and it's getting better now. So I'm going to pull up our screen here again, and what you'll notice now at the bottom here, I actually plugged my mouse and keyboard in just because it's easier to use. I can now run the Ouya App Store within the Mad Catz, which makes it a much more fun system to operate because it can actually be controlled from the controller here, and you can get all the Ouya games you may have already paid for. The problem, though, is that the nav bar is stuck here at the bottom of the screen, and this is becoming an issue for me because even when you're in an Ouya game, this nav bar is still popping up. So I'm just going to go pop over to our Mario game, or Sonic game here, Sonic the Hedgehog 4. And I'm just going to load this up real quick. And what will happen is that on the Ouya, you would get this full screen. But as you can see now that we're running it on the Mad Catz, this nav bar doesn't go away. And the one way to get rid of it, of course, is to root the device and then install some kind of plug-in thing that'll take away the nav bar. But it just doesn't feel very friendly to have to do that. And I know a lot of you are real techie and can do these kinds of rooting things, but for kids that are buying this thing, maybe buying this over the Ouya because it's more powerful, this little issue of not getting the full screen game and having to fight with this, this nav bar at the bottom of the screen, I think it's just still sloppy, and they really need to figure out a way to, even if they have to take the expense of writing their own kernel updates to the Android thing or forking it, they need to do that because this is still an issue. So the good news is that the compatibility within the Google Play Store is much improved. So if we go to the games section now, most of these games before were completely off limits, but now you can install them. So for example, I've got Asphalt 8 here is now installed and operating, but again, we're still dealing with the nav bar on the bottom. As you can see, it kind of shortens it out there, but I still have this black bar at the bottom of the screen and really not getting a full screen experience. Now, the one thing the Mad Catz does get you, though, is a lot more horsepower. So some things that kind of brought the Ouya to its knees, including this Dreamcast emulator, run a heck of a lot better on the Mad Catz. And you'll see here, it's still not perfect of an emulation, especially with the Dreamcast, but it's a lot smoother, and you can see my review of the recast for Ouya. It's a lot smoother. The graphics are a little bit better. You're not getting as many glitches, and it's certainly keeping up quite well. It's not quite up to the original Dreamcast. As you can see, there's still some glitches there, but it is a lot faster than the Ouya was able to run this same emulator with the same game, so that's pretty impressive. Now, the other thing that I found that works really well is the N64 emulator, because Nintendo 64 was kind of the limit as to what the Ouya could handle, and now the Mad Catz really does quite well with that. So here we are running Mario 64 on MuPen, which is a N64 emulator that's available also on the Ouya, and Mad Catz just runs it better, mainly because the Mojo just has more mojo. It's got a faster processor, and it's really running at a full frame rate. The Ouya version was playable, but I think it was probably running maybe 10 or 15 frames behind, depending on what was going on, but this is a lot more playable. Now, as a home theater device, this actually performs quite well, and the reason is it's got the horsepower to play a full Blu-ray MKV over my network, and it can also pass DTS and Dolby Digital audio off to my home theater receiver. Now, Ouya can do that Dolby Digital and DTS pass-through, but it just didn't have the horsepower to keep up with the Blu-ray movies. This certainly can. So if you've got a big collection that you keep on a home media server, this will do the job for you, and it's fanless. So if you're looking for something ultra quiet, this is it. And it's been running this movie for a while. I haven't overheated it yet, so it's been able to keep up with that. But the problem is you still get this navbar issue to contend with, and this is running XBMC, which I know can be removed if you root the device, but rooting is not consumer friendly. If you're trying to sell a device to consumers, you need to make it so that when you plug it in, you don't have to go through a whole bunch of steps to basically root the device and jailbreak it in order to get some basic functionality like being able to play a movie full screen without other junk on the screen. So I think they've got to do a little bit more work there. I just don't think rooting, again, is a consumer-friendly practice. It also brings in security concerns that you might accidentally install something that you don't want to have running on your Android device, and these devices are plugged into our local area networks, and it just creates a whole host of problems that I just think they'd be better off just figuring out a way to get rid of that nav bar and make things run full screen without having to go through a pretty not a complicated, but a pretty involved process of just getting it to that point. And if they did that, I would be completely satisfied, but I'm not there yet. But they have made significant improvement here. So if the first rating on the first Mad Catz was like 25% complete, I think we're up to about 75% of a complete product now, especially now that that Ouya App Store is in there and the Google Play stuff has been resolved. But they still have a little bit of a ways to go, and maybe when Google comes out with their new version of Android that's more friendly to set-top boxes, that might actually give us all the functionality we're looking for and maybe even add some things that it can't do yet. So this has got the horsepower to keep up, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. This is Lon Seidman. Thanks for watching.